So if you're a veteran in the VA claims process and you've been denied or underrated, you're probably staring at 3 options on your decision letter right now: higher level review, supplemental claims, and boards of appeals. And so in this video today, we're going to take the time to talk about each of these options and what they mean and what your best approach is if you're not sure what to do, because we're going to talk through each step for each one. And before we get started on the video, if you want to watch more in the future, subscribe to my channel because we have videos every week. So let's jump into it. All right, so let's talk about the stakes here. What are the effective dates and how can you continually pursue this effective date to get your back pay? So under the VA's modernization system, you do in fact protect your effective date by continuously pursuing a claim over the same issue. And that means filing the next review within 1 year of the decision that has happened. So if you're keeping this chain intact, let's say you've had one denial and you're going to go back through and you're going to make an appeal for it, the VA has to give you the date that you initiated the claim. Not even started it and going to the C&P exam. I'm talking the initiation date is what they have to actually bring this back to. Okay, but here's the deal. If you're breaking that 1 year marker chain, your supplemental claim that you may have in the future for that thing that you are pursuing could actually change the new effective date to when you make that supplemental claim again. Now, there are rare exceptions and specialized routes to where you can actually fight this in court. I'm not going to go into details about fighting one specific example because each person has their own opinion on how to do this and their own lawyer to do this legally, because this is not legal advice, this is just information. So there are rare exceptions, but I wouldn't bank on them if you are doing the claims process yourself. Okay, so jumping back to our rating, if you got denied or you're underrated, we need to talk about exactly what happens for each one of these. So the first one, a higher level review, and when you initiate this, there is no new evidence that you are adding. And in this process, you are requesting a one-time informal conference to point out the errors that might have happened during your C&P exam, or maybe something that was misinterpreted by the VA itself after the exam. And when this is initiated, the reviewer must flag pre-decision duty to assist errors and send your case back for reevaluation. And this comes initiated with the VA Form 20-0996. Okay, but jumping into supplemental claims, let's say you don't fall into this category, you want to add new evidence. That's where you might initiate a supplemental claim instead. So when initiating a supplemental claim, you're adding new and relevant evidence, not things that were previously uploaded that maybe you had brought in person, you would upload it online. We're talking new evidence only. And for a supplemental claim, the duty to assist actually turns back on in this scenario. And what this means is the VA helps get identifiable exams and records. And this is used with VA Form 20-0995. And now lastly, we're talking about the Board of Appeals. So when you're initiating a Board of Appeal, you are actually getting a veteran judge to look over what you have. And with this, you pick one docket per issue. So if you're going for a direct review, you're going to have no new evidence, no new hearing tests, and the goal is to have this completed or completely done in 365 days. You can also do an evidence submission where you can actually submit evidence within 90 days of the BVA receiving it. And then there's a likelihood of having a hearing, which typically is the testimony plus 90 days of time post-hearing evidence window. And to be honest, with all of these, the timing goals are really flexible. For both the higher level review and the supplemental claim, they shoot for 125 days for completion. And for the Board of Appeals, it's 365 days. So this will take a little bit of time. Okay, so now that we defined each path, let's talk through a decision sheet to understand what category you land in and where you might want to go. So the first path might be, do you want to add new evidence because you didn't add the right evidence before and then you found out later that you should have? Now, let me be very clear. If you've watched my videos long enough, in fact, if you've actually looked into the course that I have, you would know the right ways to do this in the first place. If you have no idea what I'm talking about, this is a small shameless plug. 20% off a full course that talks about writing personal statements, doing the claims process from start to finish. And if you're not convinced, sign up for the email list with a free cheat sheet guide. But let's jump into what you should do if you need to add more evidence. Well, yes, it's pretty clear. You need to file a supplemental review because just like we said above, the only thing that really matters when you're adding new evidence is making sure you have the capability to. You're initiating a supplemental review to add new and relevant evidence. So examples of this evidence is getting a new medical opinion, getting a new nexus letter, or even getting some other lay evidence that you want to add. This is additive evidence, and those all count in this area. And I highly suggest if you're going to do the supplemental route, but you have teed up going to a doctor's appointment, going to a specialist, making sure that you have as much evidence as you can provide that's additive to what you already have provided in the past. Frequently, I would say updating a lot of documents this might be the right time to do it. Go back to that first appointment that you might have as evidence and you got a denial because it was maybe too far back and say, you know what, I actually need to get something a little bit more current. Let me make sure I talk to my PCP and get a current diagnosis because that might have been what was missing. Okay, so if you don't need to add new evidence, let's go on to step 2 and what you'd be looking for. Okay, so step 2 is, do you believe the VA made a clear error during your C&P exam or maybe even after when they reviewed your evidence? And yes, bingo, if the answer was yes, higher level review it is. So during the higher level review, like we had talked about, you're not adding new evidence. You're going to ask for and request that informal conference where you can talk about the errors that you feel like were overlooked on the VA side. And this does include a legal or a factual error. So like I said in a previous video, one of the examples I had was I felt like there was a factual error with the information I gave during my C&P exam that was not written down. My mental health C&P exam was almost 2 hours long, and I believe there's pieces of information that were not added. And I was actually correct when I made that correlation, which is kind of crazy because I actually didn't see what the person had wrote about me, but I very clearly remember talking through some things that I felt were very traumatic, and I think that they were overlooked during our conversation, which is pretty fair because it got emotional. And so during this process, if the reviewer finds that there is an error, they will actually kick it back, and this will lead to some sort of correction or readjudication. And this can in fact fix a bad C&P exam or even missing records. So you won't actually lose your place in line with the higher level review process if you go down this route correctly. And again, some things are not going to be in your hands with any of these processes. And again, they're going to take a lot of time. So you're going to have to be patient in this process. Okay, so let's say you don't need to add evidence. You don't think that there was a clear error that you can actually articulate. So you're going to the third step. Let's talk through this one. So if you want a judge to weigh in credibility during a complex legal case or even a dispute on an effective date, or you just need to have a hearing, you're going to go to the Board of Appeals. So again, we talked through the little routes and the dockets that you have, but after your hearing, you have 90 days to provide new evidence if it comes out within a hearing. This is the only process I have personally not done, so I cannot speak on extreme depths and details, but I've heard a lot of stories about this going very well for veterans if they come prepared, but at the same time, this is one of the lengthier processes. And if you look through step 1 and 2 and look at those options to see if you fall into that category, make sure you do first before you go to the BVA route. And so if you're a no on that third step, I would strongly recommend going through steps 1 and 2. And if that is not the case, you might be denied because that is not your true rating that you have earned. I hate to say that out loud because I can't speak for everybody's details, but again, if you're providing the right evidence, if you have the right documentation, if you've written the right personal statements, if you've done all of the correct steps, and then you followed through with the supplemental process, you've been denied, that is going to be what your rating is, whether you like it or not. Okay, so there's some important guardrails to talk about each one of these. So let's go through a few things that are very specific. So the first one is you cannot be double dipping on the same issue. You cannot initiate a higher level review at the same time as a BVA. So keep that in mind. You have to pick with one starting lane. However, you can actually pick and change lanes within 1 year of the decision letter. But once that 1 year window has passed, a supplemental review will kick off a new effective date, and you definitely risk a later effective date from that point forward. And I will say from talking to a lot of veterans that the biggest holdup and the biggest issue they've ever had is actually not getting an appeal done within the 1 year marker. If you're going through this part, you need to make sure you're hitting that 1 year marker to not slow that chain down and to not break the chain of effect that you have into losing this claim date, because that claim date is very valuable and important. You could be going through appeals for several years and they will backdate you to the original initiation date that you've had. That is a superpower to have, especially if you're needing compensation and it's going to be back paid because you've had that rating essentially the whole time. It just wasn't proven yet the whole time. So keep that in mind. And so to wrap this video up, I want to go through these forms one more time. I'll also put them on the screen just so we have everybody on the same page here. The HLR, the VA form 20-9096. This is request for informal conference. On the form, only one per HLR. It may slow down the decision. The deadline is 1 year from the decision letter. Supplemental review, that is VA form 20-0995. You must attach or identify new and relevant evidence. You can file anytime, but to keep your date, it also must be within 1 year. And lastly is the board appeal, which is VA form 10182, notice of disagreement. You pick a docket and you must be received within 1 year of the decision. 60-day exceptions to certain options or contested claims, and evidence windows depend on the docket that you pick. I hope you found this video helpful and learned something about the decision process once you've gone through it, because if you're watching this channel, if you haven't filed a claim yet, You need to be prepared for the denial or an underrating just in case. And if you know these steps, it's going to help. But again, checking out my course or even just watching my channel, you will learn the right steps in the first place to hopefully get the rating that you deserve. And if you want to watch more, go ahead and watch the next video right up here.